Paris, the capital of fashion, the city of light, the city of love, the city of life. This is what Paris is known for. Over 40 million tourists per year come for just these reasons. People come to see the richness of the history as it's been preserved. Once known as the culture and art capital of the world as well, most get inspired also. I know I have. Enough out of me though. One aspect of Paris that I love the most is the Jardins, or the Gardens of Paris. There are so many jardins that Paris has, all with their respective beauty and certain types of people that frequent these places. They also each have their own rich history, and that's what we'll be focusing on in this series. For 2 episodes, we will focus on 2 jardins, the most famous ones, one on the right bank, one on the left bank. Both of these gardens, just like Paris itself, have their own rich histories. And believe me, they are bizarre, and that's why we're going into them. And you can fact check me. They're all true. Just Google it, but you can trust me. But in any case, I welcome you to L'Atelier du Français production, The Histories of Le Jardin. This is the first episode, and the penultimate episode, where we'll be focusing on the second largest jardin in Paris, the one in the 6th arrondissement, the Latin Quarter, the Jardin du Luxembourg. So, the history of the Jardin du Luxembourg starts as such. May 14th, 1610, Henry IV dies. I told you it's bizarre. It only gets better. Henry IV gets assassinated in a narrow street in Paris. His wife, who had just become queen the day before, Marie de Medici, is now a widow. Conspiracy, perhaps? Some say, but that's not part of the Jardin history. 2 years later, she moves out of the Louvre Palace because she couldn't keep living there. Once again, not our story, but she buys Petit Luxembourg and starts construction on a new palace there. Marie de Medici, originally from Florence, Italy, wanted to have this new palace resemble her birthplace, Palazzo Pitti. She hires French architect Salomon de Brousse to build the palace. The palace would not be all though. This is where the potential idea / first stages of a jardin becoming formed. She also hires Tommaso Francini from Florence, Italy, to build a fountain and to place it outside of her new palace, to once again remind her of her home, Italy. He builds the Medici fountain, which is still seen today. In 1624, the palace is completed, but now, in 1630, she buys more land, extending the property of the palace from 8 hectares to 30 hectares. Now, this is where it truly becomes jardin creating time. Jacques Boyot becomes commissioned. He was a worker on the creation of the Jardin Tuileries and an early version of the Versailles Gardens, and he is the literal creator of Le Jardin à la Française. Now for a while, this period is over. For the next 200 years, the royals who lived in Petit Palace kind of just keep living there. They don't really do much. They would just redesign the garden and make it how they want. So much so that in 1780, Louis XVIII sold a chunk of the garden to restore the palace, and we all know what happened 9 years later because of acts such as these. You got it, the French Revolution! Woo! As you can imagine, land gets taken over, revolutionaries, hoorah, go team, do your thing. Not long after the whole French Revolution kerfuffle and whatnot, the Jardin and the palace gets taken right back. The land gets taken right back, and they actually expanded to 40 hectares now. So, kind of tough. Another important person comes into play now. Another architect, Jean Gauguin, who was also a very famous architect. For one monument we all know, the Arc de Triomphe. He decides to make the Jardin layout mostly as it is today. He remakes the Medici fountain, because how dare the masses destroy something of a queen who made something just in her name and didn't care about France that much anyways, that's so it seems. And then he wants to keep the style of Jacques Boyot, if you remember him. And a big thing he wanted to do was to create the genuinely very long and beautiful perspective of the Jardin that goes all the way from the Palais du Luxembourg, which we know, all the way to the Paris Observatory, which from what I can tell from my very accurate Apple Maps calculation is just about a third of a mile long. I'm American, you're going to have to deal with miles and not kilometers. And I know the US created a lot of things different, but one thing I will say, I'll die on the hill of 0 cold, 100 hot, Fahrenheit. Fahrenheit, that's the one thing we cooked on, I think. We went, 0 cold, 100 hot. For the human perspective, it's just phenomenal. But that's very besides the point. If we didn't go into conspiracies for the Medici, we shouldn't get into this. So, but 0 cold, 100 hot, 75 perfect. Anywho, the Jardin becomes filled with statues of queens and saints by the order of King Louis Philippe. Then, in the 1880s and 90s, artists and writers are welcome to join the statue party. Now, you may be thinking, 1880s and 90s, that's when a lot of Paris was going under urban construction. You're exactly correct. The big dog Baron Haussmann would not mess his opportunity to get in on the Jardin du Luxembourg fun. Not without controversy, though. His whole thing was making the streets bigger, as we know, or if you don't know now, you do know. This affected the Jardin du Luxembourg and the planning of it. He, with his plans, had to shrink the Jardin du Luxembourg, and with such a thing, the Medici fountain would have to be moved to where it currently is today. So you can see that his plans worked out. Even though that people were not happy about this size change, and even had thousands of people sign a petition. Didn't go anywhere. But Gabriel Davido, a close companion of Haussmann, becomes the architect and director of parks for Paris, and decides to build ornamental gates and fences around the Jardin as we know it today. He also decides to transform what were nursery gardens into the English garden. Then, just as everything does as time moves on, minor changes happen. But that, my friends, is the history of the Jardin du Luxembourg. Started off kind of scandalous, but then nothing crazy from here on there. I know, right? Kind of cool, but disappointing as well. But don't worry, because even though this is the first and the penultimate episode, boy do we have something in store for you in the finale. But before I get to that, let's give some shout outs to some smaller, or just lesser known, even kind of known, Jardins on the left bank of Paris. First, we definitely have the Jardin des Plantes, which is incredible because the history of that is also fascinating, as it was created to basically just create plants for medicine. It was a big doctor plant. There's also the Jardin Catherine Labouré, which is a very quaint, very small, but very nice jardin to just kind of sit back and enjoy nature in. Now, if there was any part of you that did think, oh wow, this history was insane, then you just wait until episode 2, which we're saving for best, because it's the finale. Guess where? It's on the right bank. The Jardin des Tuileries, the most famous and the largest jardin in Paris. And this history is insane. It's what made me find the history of Jardin du Luxembourg. I hope you enjoyed our time and our shared experience of me just telling you and blabbing to you about a history of a park. But anywho, if it's morning, have a great day. If it's the afternoon, have a great rest of your day. And if it's night, have a good night. I'll see you soon.